needs a change of clothes. Yes, this is in the Bible. This is the place where the Bible gets really super real. God isn't a political prop. I wish our politicians knew this. Honestly. God is not a political prop, and God will not be mocked. He was the irreverent, incontinent, impotent king, and that was the least of his troubles. Never thought I'd say that from the pulpit. But I am resisting all the jokes that come through Bill Fikes' mind. I've said them at home so that I wouldn't say them up here. Now, over the last few weeks, we've seen that no matter how things seem, God is in control. And, I think that Kevin McCarthy would really verify that. Kevin McCarthy, in case you don't know, this time last week, he was the Speaker of the House. And then, it wasn't all hell broke loose, but he was ousted from his position first time. But after he was ousted, it seemed like all the experts were lining up to say that they knew that this was coming. They were saying things. There was this one Indiana University poli-sci professor who said that you should have known this, because you should have seen the writing on the wall. If you know someone who lost their job, they should have seen the writing on the wall. They got dumped by someone. They should have seen the writing on the wall. Something bad happened to them. They should have seen the writing on the wall. If you've had that happen in your life, then you understand this passage. No matter how things seem, God is always in control. But Belshazzar didn't get it yet, because he was the irreverent, incontinent, impotent king, and that was the least of his problems. Let's talk first about how he was the irreverent king. If you look at the first 4 verses, we'll nail this idea down. King Belshazzar made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords and drank wine in front of the 1,000. Belshazzar, when he tasted the wine, commanded that the vessels of gold and of silver that Nebuchadnezzar his father had taken out of the temple in Jerusalem be brought, that the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. Then they brought in the golden vessels that had been taken out of the temple, the house of God in Jerusalem. And the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines drank from them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. What is this? Here's what this is. What's going on here is that just a few days before, the Persian army absolutely annihilated the Babylonian army. And they were about 50 miles away from the gates of Babylon. Belshazzar, he's trying to rally the flagging morale of the troops because they hated him. They didn't like him at all. This was a party that had a purpose. He brings out all these sacred vessels that he's been able to collect from these other countries. Actually, he didn't collect them. Nebuchadnezzar did it by defeating the Israelite armies. And so he brings all these vessels, these sacred vessels that are meant for worship, for a worship service, and then he starts to drink from them, and he's got 1,000 of his attendants who are doing the same. His wives, his concubines, his officials, all these people, you see them lined up. It's like they're on stage saying, hey, toast, cheers. And who are they giving cheers to? They're giving cheers to the gods of gold and silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. This is the irreverence of this king. He does not understand that the God of the scriptures should be rightly awed and feared. He has no sense of that at all. In fact, Belshazzar goes way beyond anything that Nebuchadnezzar did. Here's a little hint. If you're going way beyond anything that Nebuchadnezzar has ever done, you might want to dial it back. Just a hint. But he'll get that hint a little bit more severely in just a few minutes. But the intended political message, this is a political message. This isn't so much a party. This isn't because they want to have a good time. The political message is the gods of the armies of the Babylonians defeated the Israelites. Why? Because our gods are better than their gods. And guess what? Our gods are better than the Persian gods, and we're going to beat them too. So just hang in there with me and don't run away. That's what he's trying to do. He's trying to keep everything from collapsing. But the thing is that God isn't a political prop. I wish our politicians knew this. Honestly. God is not a political prop, and God will not be mocked. So God responds, and this absolutely rocks Belshazzar's world. We'll see this in verses 5 and 6. Immediately, the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace opposite the lampstand, and the king saw the hand as it wrote. This is terrifying. How do we know it's terrifying? Verse 6. Then the king's color changed, and his thoughts alarmed him. His limbs gave way, and his knees knocked together. He was an irreverent king, and he was also an incontinent king. How do I know this? For those of you who are using an app, just switch over to the King James Version, and here's what you'll read. The king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed. His sphincter no longer works, folks. Everything's coming out. He needs a change of clothes. Yes, this is in the Bible. This is the place where the Bible gets really super real. Okay? And this is the place where you are starting to see that he has no control in any sense. He does not have any control over that. He does not have any control over his color. He does not have any control over his knees. Everything has gone. He is being exposed. In just a moment, the king who wanted to show everybody that he had everything together is shown to have nothing together. He is out of his league, and the remainder of this chapter bears that out. We know that he's an irreverent king. We've seen that because he brings out all the fine china that was God's. That was God's, not his. And then we see that he's an incontinent king because, we just read that. And then we also see that he's an impotent king, that he's a king who lacks any power. In verses 7 through 9, he calls all of his astrologers together. This is the third time this has happened in the book of Daniel, right? This is the third time where a king gets troubled by something, and all of the experts, they come in the door and they don't have the answer. Again, he is powerless. He does not have the wisdom that is necessary to rule. Then in verses 10 through 12, the queen comes in. Actually, it was probably the queen mother, and most theologians and scholars are pretty much agreed about that. She comes in and she says, since you don't have it together, call Daniel. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, but wait, this is chapter 5. We saw Daniel do stuff in chapter 4. Doesn't he understand that? Doesn't he get it? Well, whenever you're reading the Bible, remember this is taking something that takes place in chapter 5. This probably took place 20 to 25 years after what took place in chapter 4. See, sometimes we compress it in our minds of this all happens at once. It doesn't all happen at once. Each one of these events, they happen 5, 10, 20 years apart from one another. So this event, so I'm actually being good to Belshazzar, okay? I'm actually saying there might be a reason why he doesn't quite understand this, but his mom comes in the door and she says, "Okay, call Daniel." Daniel gets summons to the court. Meanwhile, Belshazzar is trying to fix all of this, and he can't fix it because he's a lightweight in a heavyweight world. He does not have, what is the political term they use? Gravitas. He has no gravitas. Negative gravitas. In spite of being a lightweight, however, he has this arrogant irreverence that's about to be judged by God. And that's what we start to read in verse 23. Daniel says to him, "You have lifted up yourself against the Lord of heaven, and the vessels of his house have been brought in before you, and you and your lords, your wives, and your concubines have drunk wine from them, and you have praised the gods of silver and gold, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which do not see or hear or know, but the God in whose hand is your breath, and whose are all your ways, you have not honored." Verse 26. This is the interpretation of the matter. This is the writing on the wall. Daniel's walked in, he's already seen it, he knows what it says. He was able to interpret it. This is the interpretation of the matter. Mene, God has numbered the days of the kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Perez, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. So the meaning of these three Aramaic words, of these words that any child who was educated would have known how to read these words. It means you have been numbered, you have been weighed, you have been divided. And guess what, Belshazzar? You are a lightweight. You don't belong here. You've decided that you're going to pick a fight with God, and every time you are going to lose. Now, how does this message, how is it relevant to our world today? Okay, a few things. Number one, this is a message of judgment that we find here in this prophetic book. It was intended for one person and one person only. It's intended for Belshazzar. Why am I saying this? Because we've heard it all the time growing up. Dare to be a Daniel. Don't dare to be a Daniel like this. Okay? You are a lightweight too. I am a lightweight too. We're not supposed to go around judging people as the book of Romans chapter 2 just told us. Or you can go to Matthew chapter 7. You can go to all these places where you're told, don't be throwing down these judgments. This is a prophet who is given a judgment from the throne of heaven. So let's just remember there are certain things that are for Daniel and certain things that are for us, and they aren't always the same thing. And in this case, you want to step away from that one. Second thing, Daniel is answering a very simple question, and the question he's answering is, well, what does this mean? What does it mean? He's saying simply this: you have been mocking God, and God's going to stop that right now. God is in control, and things are going to change right now. He was the irreverent, incontinent, impotent king, and that was the least of his troubles. Verse 30. That very night, Belshazzar, the Chaldean king, was killed. Well, that's that. This happened on October 12th, as I mentioned earlier. Belshazzar didn't even make it through the night. When God's judgment comes, and he wants it to come, it comes quickly, it comes fiercely. And if you're nearby, get back. Get as far away from it as you can. But what else do we see here? I want you to focus on the word king. What kind of king was Belshazzar? Was he a good king? No. But there is a good king. He's a king who came and was born. He lived a perfect life, died on the cross in your place and mine. He was risen from the dead, ascended into heaven. He rules, he reigns. All of the scriptures point to Jesus, including this one. This one points us again to Jesus. And the thing was that this one king, he was setting up his own dinner party in order to show how big and bad and powerful he was, and he wasn't. He was a lightweight. Here's some more good news. This king who died for you wants to dine with you. That's what the Lord's table is. This king who is all-powerful and who Belshazzar could not last the night. This king, he calls you son. He calls you daughter if you are in Christ. This is great news. If you will dine with him, you know that you will live for all eternity because he is a heavyweight under whose rule everyone will